Is HaShulchan Yardeh Simon Yud Ches Sif Mem Ches to Mem Tes. This is day 95 of the Supplemental Arukh HaShulchan Yomi series. Mem Ches. Shana Chacham Mishnah. Chacham tells the Mishnah at the end, in the second paragraph of the Goyim. Kol B'choros Adam Baruch Hu B'choros Atzma. A person can look at the movement of any B'chor except the B'chor which he himself owns. Pena Kavan Shal Yodo Shal Shalo Ein Adam Shal Ros. Doesn't mean that you can't pass your own stuff. First, Chazal say explicitly that differently the opposite in Eruvin Samar Gimel and Chulin Mem Daled. Therefore, one of our rabbis explained the B'david is Chazak Yisur, it's saying where there's an assumption of prohibition. Gamo B'chor, such as B'chor should B'cheskas Isser, where it is assumed to be Osir, and B'cheskas Chacham L'horos, or Chacham cannot issue ruling. However, B'david she'enu B'cheskas, which is not assumed to be Osir previously, Yochel L'horos, he can't baskin, that's the Rosh. If the assumption of prohibition is something which he himself can remove, such as the shech, the animal, only show or to go reverse his oath which made something hekdesh, he himself can reverse the chazaka, if he shechs the animal, or he will nullify the oath by a sage. There's a chulin, and he can move it to be from its sanctity to make it mundane. That's one thing. He's also credible to Baskin himself. Based on this, one of the great Achronim wrote, "To lo shari el lishkot." This is only a question when it's only when he can shecht. I mean, ira lo she'elav shchita. But if he has a question about the shchita, al yorish now paskin on the animal. That's a taz. Ubir dvar. The meaning when he says it came to these chazik yisur since the prohibition is assumed. And of course, an animal, while it's alive, is assumed to be osir. It's not just assumed; it's the cheskas isser is more. I just translate normally chazaka's assumption, but it's a status, it's a state of isser. And rashai lahoros, that's why he's not allowed to paskin himself. And he came with davar shebiyado unless it's something which in his hands. Okay, eno naman rakli b'dokas kom shchita. There's only believed to check the night prior to shchita, mishum the other lishchot, because he has capacity to shecht. The shchot is also permitted to shecht. Mitam the rob mitzvah made shchita mochem, because he assumes part of the majority of people who can involve themselves in shchita who are experts. Or mishum negam mishas ma'isa the shchita, or because we say at the time that he's actually performing the shchita, because I'm b'shiviyado, still called in his hands. So too, when there's a question of trefa has to do with the lung, or other limbs, he can look at himself. The came in nishchleb cheskas hetermas. Go on to check it properly. Now it's going to be heter. A question which arises concerning the shchita itself. Says that we have a doubt about the knife after the shchita. Of this the nick or is a suffix shchita, or a doubt about the shchita itself. Also, so he can't pass himself. It still hasn't left the assumption of prohibition. And it's no longer in his hands anymore since it's ready after the shchita. Let's see, he says in the brackets that seems to be the shot in the Taz. If according to this, I have to say, the Zesham leave that's more. Tam Chacham's out to check the knife for himself. Ain't no Ella Lifnei Shchita, is only before Shchita. Ava Achar Shchita. But after the Shchita, if he has a question of doubt, that's no Shchita Paskim himself. That which Chazal say you can check a trefa for yourself. Ain't Ella B'Trefa Lo is Chazer. It's only by trefa where there's no assumption of prohibition. B'cholki I have a farish. So the Arukh HaShulchan says this should be explicit somewhere. But also never was the poskim mention anything about this this distinction about Shiloh's shayas and shayas about the shchita. But tzarchim, it requires further analysis. Memtes. He's like the ain't means they're rakah b'chor. So Arukh HaShulchan says, you know what, this halacha only applies to b'chor. Mishneh time for two reasons. Echad, first of all, that which you said, a person is not allowed to expect the blemishes of his own b'chor. Meyer b'koin. So about a koin, Pirish Rashi, bestow pregnant b'chor, like Rashi says b'chor stuff lam and alf. Ayin Sham. Kohanim it's a special thing by Kohanim. They're chashudim, they're suspect, to put a blemish into their b'choros. Kamavur b'cholam satasham like Ischil or Mesachos b'choros. Anybody suspect in a matter low, don't know, we cannot judge it or testify concerning it. If you also low road, so Rabbi B'choros said every can't ask about his own B'choros. The time Shane, the second reason, the move by Gemara so okay, the B'choros, it's clear from the Gemara Daf Vav that Torah's B'chor can't Torah's netted that allowing a B'chor is similar to nullifying a nether. High time it's going to shlosha Torah's B'chor, and that's why you need 3 people to permit a B'chor. Fascinating idea. I ain't sure. Also, Mishnah Shneir, there we learned to Shneir, then Mishnah learned there, Chol Nedarim Adam Mati Chutzin Jiyatzon. Person can nullify all vows except for his own. V'yem Mikra, we learn from a pasuk, Lo Yachal Vara, we can't make his own words mundane. That's with his own words. Mamid Lamed. To who ain't no Mechel, he can't nullify his own vow. V'chem Mechlin. They can nullify his variant shop. People they ever got a Torah's B'chor, fasting parallel. I've never dreamt of it. Therefore, a Torah's B'chor ain't no piazza can't be done by himself. L'chein shana oso hatana b'yachad. That's why Tana links the two. HaTorah's Nedarim, HaTorah's B'cheros. Bracket says, Yivayin neither the amount of Chav and Beis and Masakol, Madani Yontif, Sabri Abchos, and Divya Chamuros. The Harosh, he writes that the Rosh lays as far as the Rosh Einsham. The Rosh does not agree with the Rosh. In other words, you could pass in your own animal. As Chazal said, you need a reason for your biyado. And it's kosher ma'aser zergam neh chashad. So also in kind of concern with neh hamigo ne'aman kol echad ma'aser. Well, the migo eliminates that because that kind of migo everybody's leaved on the ma'aser beimishlo. We'll show him a mishnah daflan above. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what he's referring to there, but in any event, he wants to say that he does have the Rosh argues in the Rosh and says you do have credibility even on your own animal. And that's it for today, I believe. Yes.